Thank you. Okay, PacificSource, please begin by introducing yourselves and explaining your rate request and your slideshow.
Hi, my name is Benjamin Shea, and I'm one of the actuaries here at PacificSource, responsible for our ACA filings. I will be sharing my screen and presenting our presentation momentarily. Okay. So for our 2023 qualified health plans, we'll start with our individual filing. So with our individual rate filing, trend and worse than expected experience are the primary drivers of PacificSource's 12.6% average rate increase. The rate increases or the rate changes will vary by plan due to plan-specific changes and also geographic area, as we made some changes to our area factors. The rate changes vary between a minimum of 6% and a maximum of 17.3%. And PacificSource has approximately 29,000 members that are potentially impacted by this rate change. For portfolio changes, we have no plans that were discontinued, and we added one new plan, and that's a Bronze 9100 plan. Looking at plan modifications, as stated earlier, most of the changes are related to the AV calculator and keeping plans within the de minimis range for their metal levels. So I won't go over all of these in detail, but in general, most of the changes are increases in deductible and out-of-pocket to keep things in range. There are also a few changes to primary care and urgent care copays, as well as specialist copays. In most cases, those were small increases from the prior year. And one additional change, we made some changes to our tier 2 and our tier 1 and tier 2 pharmacy copays on some plans. So here are some additional plans that had some more benefit changes. In addition to the prior plans, there were also some changes to coinsurances for tier 3 and tier 4 pharmacy benefits. Moving on to network changes, there were no changes to the network. So plans will, Navigator plans will still be offered statewide in 2023. Moving on to our small group filing next. Similar to individual, trend and worse than expected experience are the primary drivers of PacificSource's 8.9% average increase for the small group market. Rate changes will vary by plan, area, and also by renewal quarter, with ranging from a minimum of a 3.3% decrease to a maximum of a 14.5% increase. We have approximately 11,000 members that are impacted by this rate increase, and these rates are expected to remain in effect for 12 months with a 1.5% quarterly trend adjustment effective April, July, and October 1st of 2023. For plan changes, we did have a couple of discontinuations. So our Silver 3000 plan on both Voyager and Navigator networks will be discontinued and mapped to the Silver 3500 plan. And then we also added a couple new plans. So we've added a Silver 3500 and a Bronze 9100 plan on both our Voyager and Navigator networks. For plan modifications, similar to individual, most of these changes are increases in deductible and out-of-pocket maximums to keep the plans within the acceptable AV ranges. Again, there were some small changes to various copays. You'll see a lot of the pharmacy tier 1 and tier 2 copay changes on this page, as well as some specialist copays on the next page here. There weren't any additional large changes to benefits for any other reason. And the plan modifications made were identical for both the Navigator and Voyager plans. Moving on to network changes. There were no changes to the Navigator network, which will continue to be offered statewide. There was a small change to our Voyager network. The service area for that network will be reduced to Baker, Malheur, Jackson, and Josephine counties. So that's just a change to Douglas County, which was available in Voyager previously and will not be in 2023. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Back to you, Michael, where division staff will now lead a discussion about the division's review of the filings and the preliminary decisions.
Thank you, Tasha. First, for introductions, my name is Michael Sinks, a senior life and health actuary and primary reviewer of these filings.
My name is Ying Liu. I'm actually in the division and I'm secondary of the filing.
All right, let's get started. Okay, so get my notes up. In the review of the filing, there are 3 primary components that we review for every filing. I have the first component that we look at, or 3 main buckets that we look at, is the data that goes into the filing. This includes everything from the claims and the membership of the filing or of the experience period, which in this case is calendar year 2021, to the updated risk adjustment information that comes in late in the filing. In this case, just a couple of weeks ago, we got a updated data from CMS regarding risk adjustment. We take all of that, we make sure that the data is appropriate for the filing, is credible. In this case, for the individual filing, they had 29,000 members. We consider a full and credible plan to have on average 2,000 members. They've got significant members in excess of 2,000. Same on the small group side, they got 11,000. So this is a credible block of business. This is credible data. So there's not usually significant adjustments to these filings, and in PacificSource's case, there was none. But as PacificSource has indicated, they did operate at significant losses, and since individual is the higher of the 2 rate increases, I will use them as an example, but the same is going to hold true for the small group side as well. For example, on the individual side, they have a preliminary loss of 3% in the base period, but then they make adjustments for risk adjustment and reinsurance, and it actually got even worse to a 7% loss. One of the things we do is we make sure that these companies are running a product line that is sustainable. And when you take a look at a -7 margin, when they typically will target a 3% margin, that's off by 10% right there. However, the company has decided that they are going to target 0%. So there's so backing away from that 10% deficiency in premiums, they're still off by 7%. So that's kind of a starting point in that first bucket we look at in their data. The risk adjustment was not a significant player this year. I'll talk about that in the assumptions, which is the next bucket. The next bucket being the assumptions that go into the filing to get your base period experience from 2021 to the filing period, which is the rates for 2023. To your projection has significant changes based on the change in the enrollment, change in the morbidity, change in the plan mixture, what people are enrolling in. There are several other factors, but the predominant one for all rate filings this year was medical trend. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But there were several other assumptions that we took a look at that were not significant drivers for the PacificSource plans in 2023. And that includes risk adjustment, reinsurance was not much change from the prior year. Silver loading, which is the cost sharing reduction non-payments being put onto the on-exchange plans, that was not a significant change from the prior year. COVID, there is actually adjustments on the individual plans for COVID in PacificSource, but those were that adjustment was to reduce the starting period claims by a couple percent, so the rate increase is lower than it could have been if they did not make that adjustment. And finally, there is talk, but currently not seen in the filings, that non-medical inflation, which recently was reported at 9.1%, could have an effect on medical inflation in the near future. But again, that's not in the rate filings as of today for the 2020 rate filings. Okay, so of those were not the significant drivers of the rate increase, that loss of 7% and the medical trend. The medical trend for PacificSource health plans for the individual products is overall a 5.1%. That includes a cost component of 1.7% and a utilization component of 3.3%. On the small group side, very similar numbers, 5.1 overall, but the mix is slightly different, 2% cost and 3.1% for utilization. This is a pretty low overall trend compared to the other carriers in the marketplace. PacificSource is doing their best to keep down their cost trends, but when you add the 7% of losses with a year of trend of 5%, you're already at the 12% rate increase right there. And so that gets to the final bucket that we're looking at for 2023, which is the calculations to get from the 2021 base period using the assumptions to get to 2023 rate request. And that rate request, and the calculations were done correctly, accurately, and consistently. Consistent is important too, that they're not making major changes to the way they calculate things to manipulate the numbers. But these are consistent calculations. They are accurate. So we are left with the rate request of 12.6% that is justified by the trend, which is not excessive, and the losses in 2021. And with that, our initial plan is to approve these filings as filed for 12.6% for individual. And as I said, everything applies to small group as well, 8.9% for small group. Wanted to point out, since I did talk about the cost growth target initiative, this is where we start differentiating between the carriers. The cost target, or the cost trends for PacificSource is 1.7% and 2%, which is well under the 3.4% target. This needs to be, we need to look at that in a year-by-year basis and over time. But the retroactive tests are not going to be done by us. They'll be done by OHA. And then there's that other portion of this, that the company lost money in 2021. And how does that play into the setting the rates. Well, it makes the rates significantly higher than 3.4%, but not because of cost growth, but it's because the rates were insufficient in 2021 and 2022. So that's where we're at. This is still observing. We will take this information back to the committee, but currently we have no further action at this time. Anyway, that is my review. Thank you, Tasha.
Thank you, Michael. PacificSource, do you have any additional information or comments that you would like to make on these filings?
We do not have any additional comments to make at this time. Thank you.
We will now take any public testimony. I don't believe anybody has signed up to testify, but if you would like to testify, please unmute and introduce yourself. Okay, as a reminder to anyone listening, July 28th is the last day for public comments. Comments can be submitted through our website, OregonHealthRates.org. Thank you, and that concludes today's hearing.